Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Friend Wrap. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, today joined by Makone and Maja. Let's get into the news of today. And we actually kind of had to sort of slightly rejig this episode because events are moving so fast. But there is currently negotiations underway because it looks like the deal, which was described as having been reached on the budget yesterday between the DA and the ANC, appears to have fallen apart. One of the big sticking issues was apparently that the DA wanted the Deputy Ministers of Finance, David Masonda from the ANC and Ashwell Shurippan from the DA, to chair Operation Vulindlela, which is the presidency's great reform body, which has produced disappointing results up till now. And that the ANC doesn't want to do this, and they have even claimed, now, I'm not a lawyer, but this seems to me fairly ridiculous, that it would be unconstitutional to do such a thing, to elevate the deputy finance ministers. So that sounds like rubbish to me, but, you know, I speak under correction of someone with more legal knowledge than I. But regardless, with that kind of plan seeming to fall apart, it looks like the ANC has managed to find a plan B. What is plan B? Well, the Government of National Unity, if you include a couple of other parties, does in fact have just enough seats without the DA to maybe pass something, maybe. If you take the ANC, IFP, Patriotic Alliance, UDM, Al Jamaha, Good, PAC, and Rise Mzansi seats together, and you exclude the DA and the Freedom Front Plus, you get about 194 seats. If you add to that Action SA's 6 seats, you have 200, which is half of the seats in Parliament. And then you only need the support of either the ACDP, Build One South Africa, or the National Coloured Congress to have a majority. So it looks like the ANC is going to be moving ahead with the non-DA GNU. This is a Frankenstein collection of a whole bunch of the small parties, any of which, if they left, could probably collapse the whole thing. It's an interesting strategy in the sense that I think that there's some skepticism as to whether it will be able to hold together. This is a lot of small partners to keep involved that you're probably going to have to constantly pay off, and who may derive, value from being able to essentially collapse the government if any of them leaves, particularly the UDM, PA, and IFP, who will now all be able to basically pull out of the thing and make it fall apart. There's now much speculation as to whether the DA will stay in the GNU whatsoever, whether the ANC will try and just bulldoze on with all the small parties backing it. There's a lot of questions that remain to be answered. But Makone, as of what we know now and where things stand now, what do you make of the situation?
It is worth notifying our viewers that this is a fast-moving story, so things may look very different even from 10 minutes between when we're recording this and when it's released. So do make adjustments for that. But it seems Action SA is coming into this budget to support it, provided the 0.5 percentage point increase is removed from the budget. And I think there's one more condition, Nick, that they had in amending
the income tax bracket creep.
Yes.
So note the tax increases, but what's going to replace them? Is there going to be a cut in spending?
I don't see a cut in spending from what's being reported currently. The revenues and the incomes are apparently going to stay the same, which is hard to imagine because the assumption should be that the Treasury's fiscal framework at present is operating on the assumption that there is a 0.5 percentage increase. So it's quite disappointing. I think that there should be, Action SA should want more for its support. And this is a trend that I think you have highlighted about the behaviors of small parties in South Africa. If you are going to lend your support to a very contentious budget, it's failed to pass twice, or it's failed to pass the first time, it's struggling to get through the second time, you should understand the leverage that you have and exercise it over parties, specifically like the ANC. A lot of the times in the South African political sphere, we we scold the DA for their arrogance, for not wanting to let other parties have influences over the coalitions that they operate. But the ANC is doing the same, except this is not a metro, it's not a city, this is the entire nation's budget at stake. And so I'd assume that a party like Action SA, which is being run by a businessman, Herman Mashaba, who should know how to negotiate, would come and have its own list of things for the government about how it should cut back on spending, because we do need growth. And it's at least make proposals for other reforms, and let the ANC reject it if it does, right? And maybe submit a second set of reforms, which is what the DA, it appears the DA did. They submitted their reforms, they were ignored. They submitted a second set, and they too were just, ANC just bulldozed through those and went ahead without its support. It's an impossible task to get the DA at the two biggest parties within the GNU, the DA and the ANC, to agree on this budget. I think it's only fracturing the relationship even more. And the end of the GNU has been held above our heads for such a long time. It feels like
it's basically day one.
Since day one. Exactly. It's been rattling and cracking, and with every other impasse as the budget, it seems there's more crackling, and there just seems to be a difficulty in the parties agreeing on growth reforms. So yeah, I'm disappointed to see that Action SA is not able to generate or access more leverage or make more demands for what it expects the ANC will give in exchange for its support of this budget.
So if this budget does in fact get passed and Action SA replaces the DA, and I presume the Freedom Front Plus won't stay in the coalition, especially if the DA is not in it. Maybe they will, but I think it's unlikely. This is very much a recipe for status quo. Once again, the ANC is refusing to make a choice. Is it going to go with the EFF and MK and sort of triple down on the National Democratic Revolution, take off all the brakes and see where that leads them? Or are they going to, take the bitter medicine of reform that the DA is offering? And the ANC has said, we will choose neither. We will choose to keep trudging slowly into the grave, apparently. I don't think this can last, if indeed it does turn out to last. We don't know. By the time this episode is being watched at 7:00 tonight, you may find the situation has changed again. But I think this just kind of shows how utterly stubbornly resistant the ANC is to absolutely any kind of change to the policy status quo, to the point where they are even willing to perhaps talk to Action SA about dumping all of the tax increases that they, even kind of overrode their own party members to push through, in order to avoid having to make even the slightest policy concessions to the DA. Amazing stuff to watch, politically speaking. But I think that IFP, to be honest, supported this bill way too easily. Now, IFP has enough ability to basically also tank this budget if they wanted to. And I'm not clear as to what the IFP has gotten out of this budget, apart from the fact the ANC is not going to dethrone them in KZN, because that's a pretty weak concession, considering the ANC needs the IFP as much as the other way around. So, disappointing.
And say perhaps we're speaking too soon, because we don't even know what these parties are being offered in exchange for their support of a contentious budget. They don't need to support it. Nobody likes this budget, right? They can just move on right into the sunset. But perhaps it comes out later, when the story has fully been reported on, that there were concessions that the ANC was willing to afford Action SA and IFP, which I find it hard to believe, because even the reforms that the DA were proposing, which would provide them more influence over our fiscus, don't seem that radical to me. These are just oversight roles that they wanted to have, and more influence over decision making.
Yeah, one of them is a spending review. I mean, come on.
That's the oversight I'm speaking about. It's even hard to think of this as a reform, as groundbreaking. It's just an audit. on how we spend our money. And yet the biggest partner in the GNU is being shown the door in terms of consensus. So perhaps the story, once fully developed, we get to learn that actually.
Yeah, I'm going to take the cynic's bet on that one and guess that it's not going to be anything. And I will eat the humble pie if I'm wrong. But that's my prediction for now. Okay, yeah. So because so much is uncertain, let's move on to our next story. And I guess this is very closely tied to the first one, which is that the hope and optimism that came about when the GNU was formed, that with many businessmen and businesses hoping that the country was about to turn the corner on its economic malaise, which is now devastating. Oh, by the way, on this point, South Africa's average growth over the last 10 years has been something like 0.6%, 0.7%, I believe. Japan, which is infamous for its so-called lost decades of low growth, has averaged around 1.6% or 1% during that time. This demonstrates how severe the problem is. But anyway, the sugar high is very clearly over as the reforms have failed to materialize. And now you have this thing that you linked to me, Makone, today. Merchant Tech Capital has done does a CEO confidence index, and they have seen a significant drop in the CEO confidence index with CEOs being increasingly skeptical of government. The number who are sort of positive view has dropped from about 54% to 45% just over the last quarter, and that 95% of CEOs believe inefficient and wasteful government spending is the primary cause of South Africa's budget deficit. So I think business, at least, is not buying government's claims about, they're just not being enough money and that we need to raise taxes. And it looks like the sentiment about South Africa's positive trajectory is also dimming. What do you make of this?
I think you could have expected this response from business. Whenever the budget in February, whenever a budget is supposed to be tabled, you have all these business people contributing in newspapers across the board, what they wish to see, a wish list of things they wish to see represented in the budget. And unanimously, every other article I read this year was about reforms. And what do those reforms look like? Basically a spending review, an implementation of what we like to refer to as the Zondo Commission's recommendations of value for money in the revenue that we pay to the state, that we give to the state. I need business to go a step further in identifying the sources of wasteful and fruitless expenditure. Things like BEE premiums, right? This is the legal amount that people pay to get somebody who is of color or a woman to provide a service to the state. That person is given extra points on the BEE scorecard, which means we pay them more to provide goods and services. I need business to go a step further and identify those key sources, those institutions in South Africa that create fodder for an environment of wasteful expenditure. And BEE premiums is definitely one of them. The fact that we do not have value for money as a requirement in our procurement processes is, again, another one of those key areas which business needs to go further in saying to the state, we need these sort of reforms to be introduced. It's not enough to say, yes, money is being wasted. There's a black hole. We're bleeding money in our government. You need to approach government with at least some ideas of how to cut back on that spending and that waste. And another one of those ways is the fact that we simply have too big a state. Our public servants earn way too much. The taxes are too high. I mean, the Minister Godongwana came out during the press briefing after the budget was failed to be delivered, and he said that corporates in South Africa, on average, pay more taxes than corporates in the OECD countries. What incentive do they have of coming to operate here if they're better off working with those countries like Japan, which you mentioned in its plight of low growth is still doing far better than South Africa? So yeah, I think we need business to be slightly more assertive, and they can rely on data from the Institute. I mean, we've done the groundwork on this to demonstrate that yes, the state is bloated, the state is losing way too much money, and it's because it's too big and it's wielding too many resources. But if you slim it down, then it can, again, dish out money that it's able to control, as opposed to the system that we have now, where that money is just being flung around everywhere and it's not going to the goods and services as that it's directed to.
Yeah, it's not enough to simply complain behind closed doors. It's not enough to make vague statements about corruption and that. And big business in particular needs to stop looking for carve-outs, stop looking for, behind-the-scenes pressure, and say something. And then the response is like, well, then government will target us. I don't think government is in a position right now to start actively targeting businesses. And if they do, then you really can't, things are never going to get better. You actually kind of need to show what you really think. And there are business leaders who do this from time to time, but they are few and far between. And the face of what business says sort of round the dinner table muttering is very different to what they say in public. And I think there should be a lot more alignment between those two things if you actually want to see the change in South Africa. And that kind of goes for all South Africans, but business, I think, has a special role to play in that they often do understand these issues on a certain level. Okay, let's call it to a close there. Hopefully you found the show interesting. Like we said, we'll probably be out of date by the time you listen to this, but hopefully we've said something worth bearing in mind as we go forward. And yeah, we'll see. The drama is not over yet at all. And I don't think it's going to be anytime soon in the next 3 or 4 years, to be honest. But I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you all tomorrow on The Daily Friend Show. Cheers, everyone. The Daily Friend Show and The Daily Friend are a project of the Institute of Race Relations, the IRR. The IRR is a think tank which was founded in 1929 to study race relations in South Africa and works to change government policy to improve race relations through non-racialism and to ensure the prosperity of all South Africans. If you like our work and would like to support us, please go to irr.org.za and click Support the IRR. Or you can go to thedailyfriend.co.za and click the Fund Us button.